All right. Well, good evening. I know it's quite unusual for me to be here this late, but you know what? I'm in one of those stages of insomnia that creeps up on me every now and then. And so, y'all know what I do when I get insomnia. I go live in the middle of the night. So, anyway, I hope you guys are doing great. The trial, Murdaugh, today was pretty interesting for me. Um, I think I think old Alec is beginning to see the writing on the wall. What do y'all think? I think it's coming. It's becoming real for him. Welcome, Tennessee Volunteer. You're the winner tonight. Hey, Thing One, me's her mom, Kathy R, Vicky Carpenter. Welcome. I know. So I'm working a lot of hours, and there's just an awful lot happening. It's lots and lots of work, and um, I don't have much. I don't have much time, and the time I do have to myself, I'm just tired. You know, get home, go straight to bed, and get up before sun and do it again. So I apologize for that. I wish that I had a life where I could just do trial analysis every day. I wish I could do that, but I need to make money. So all right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to watch The Pathologist today. Okay, and I'm just going to comment on it. So I hope you don't find it boring. um if you've already watched it, as I'm sure that you have, um, then that's okay if you go find somebody else to watch. I don't want you to be bored. Share screen. But I thought today was really interesting, and so I wanted to comment and give some of my insights. Okay, all right. So here we go.
Following that, I did an additional fellowship training year at Johns
So this is the doctor that did the autopsies on Paul and Maggie Murdaugh.
Hopkins Hospital, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, also in Baltimore. And I am board certified in forensic pathology and anatomic pathology. After I completed all my education and fellowship training, I took my first job as a forensic pathologist at Wake Forest University Baptist
Which
Medical
is
Center, Wake
very
Forest University School
impressive.
of Medicine in North Carolina, where I
Very
remained
impressive.
for almost 6 years. But before being recruited by the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, where I've been for 14 years as a forensic pathologist.
All right, and at the Medical University of South Carolina, you said you're a forensic pathologist. Do you have any professorship or teaching responsibilities
Yes,
there?
so I have also the title of Professor of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. And because Medical University of South Carolina is a teaching institution, I am responsible for educating physicians in training as well as medical students, and that's an integral part of my job. So a lot of the work I do is observed by students and trainees.
And you mentioned you had some board
Meaning
certifications.
she's the
Can you tell those to the
expert.
jury, please?
She
Yes,
teaches other
so,
people how to do that job.
In order for somebody, there's the American Board of Pathology is the organization that certifies specialists in different fields. And well, the American Board of Pathology certifies specialists in pathology and requires them to take very long examinations and demonstrate and pass those examinations. And you can't just sit down and take them. You have to
Okay,
have
you're the expert in the world.
You published in the field of pathology over the years, given your professorships and your education and
Yes.
expertise.
Because I'm interested in, educating the medical community, I published close to
So she is just stating her credentials and accomplishments so that the judge can identify her as an expert, a topic expert, and she now becomes the authority in the room, is what's happening here.
Of autopsies.
Yes, so the principal responsibility of my work is to perform autopsies on deceased individuals in order to determine the cause and manner of death. And over the course of my career, don't keep exact track, but I estimate that I've done approximately 5,500 autopsies.
5,500?
Correct.
All right, and we'll talk more about what an autopsy is in a minute. Over that course of time doing 5,500 autopsies, have you been qualified as an expert and testified in courts of record in the nation?
Yes, so again, I'm not approximating South Carolina in where
If she
I autopsy.
if she is teaching her field, her area of specialty, if she's a professor at a medical school and she's a clinician and she's doing forensic work, she's the best in her field, right? So she's not going to have any trouble getting certified.
Dr. Reamer, Professor Reamer, as an expert in forensic pathology.
No objection, Your Honor.
She's so qualified.
All right, Dr. Reamer, before we get to your specific findings in this case, can you quickly describe to the jury what is pathology and what is an autopsy? What is it that your science...
Trying to get through this so we can get to the content.
In cases where you have traumatic injury, there's no getting around the fact that it's very graphic. In this particular case, to examine the victims of these murders.
So one thing that I noticed this morning, when Murdaugh came into the courtroom, already he was angry. Like already you could look on his face and it was none of the aw shucks, I'm a good old boy kind of demeanor. He either didn't sleep last night or he was having a major disagreement with maybe his attorneys, maybe with family members. But there was none of that social image management today. He was withdrawn. He was smoldering in anger. No, he was already not having a good day. And by the time he left, I was thinking, ooh, they better put him on suicide watch.
One.
And is it typical when you're conducting an autopsy that you have assistants there that assist you in performing these procedures and that sort of thing?
Yes, so I have assistants to help me with whatever I need, and the autopsies, I do the autopsy, and any assistance I need is done under my direction.
Sure. And then is it common that photographs are taken of the various injuries and your various findings as you do the autopsy?
Yes.
All right. Take
And the photographs that he mentioned, that's a big part of why
Hallmark.
I wanted to react today, is I was taken back by the detachment that Buster is demonstrating. They are showing the actual photographs of the bodies, the locations of the wounds, the front entry, the exit wound, as graphic as it can possibly be, right? Alec Murdaugh is shook. He's in bad shape. By the end of the day, he has been through the tumbler. Buster was alarmingly cold.
boards behind you. And the first one is marked as States 500. And can you explain very quickly what this is to the jury, please?
Okay, so you may have seen these kinds of diagrams. These are blank body diagrams, and so when I autopsy a man or male, I start with that diagram, and it's basically a vehicle for me to take notes during the autopsy, so I can incorporate findings into my final autopsy autopsy report. But this is not, something that, this is really for my edification, and so I can write things down, and it helps me when I write the autopsy report to make sure I've covered everything.
They do become a
Well,
part of
this
the,
assists you as we,
final
if
record
you
as well.
explain to
You'll
the
find
jury
them
the injuries
in
that the
medical
two
notes and
victims
stuff.
Yes.
The diagrams.
Dr. Reamer, let's, again, starting with Paul, very quickly, how many, did you observe any gunshot wounds to Paul?
Well, actually, there were 2 shotgun wounds, so that's different than a handgun, or, so a shotgun is where there, there's basically pellets that are enclosed in a wadding.
Like
and
miniature
the
cannonballs.
wadding, after it's fired from the shotgun, kind of opens up and allows all these pellets to be released from the wadding. And so the features of his injuries told me in no uncertain terms that he was shot with a shotgun.
And let's, if I could ask you with the court's permission, if you could step down. I'm going to hold up this board, and if you could bring a marker with you. I've got a red Sharpie right here if that helps you. And let's talk about the injuries that you observed to Paul Murdaugh, and then if you could, for the jury, if you could illustrate, draw on this board that the first gun, shotgun Paul. All right, let me put mine up real quick.
Okay. Okay, so in order to make things as clear to you possible, entrance wound and red for exit, okay?
You
So,
can tell
just
she's a
arbitrarily.
teacher.
Okay, so
She definitely an
Paul
instructor.
had 2 shotgun wounds. One of them was to the left side of the chest, approximately this location, and the wadding containing the pellets traveled beneath the skin through like the soft tissue of the left side of the chest.
That is devastating, right? That is devastating. The first firearm that I had for like personal protection, my dad gave me my grandpa's shotgun. And what he told me, he said, all you got to do is point it in the general direction of the intruder and pull the trigger, because something is going to hit him, right? When each of the cartridges on the shotgun, it's filled with beads, right? And they're different sizes. Well, with Paul, there were 2 different gauges, 2 different size of pellets inside the cartridge. And one of them, he basically was hit with buckshot, which is like a bunch of little cannonballs. Like they're pretty large, right? He was also hit with birdshot, which is a smaller gauge of pellet. But both of his wounds, because it was a shotgun, and the fact that the wadding actually penetrated his body, is the barrel of the gun was right there. Like it was within inches of his skin. So whoever did this, they were intending him to die. They weren't making a mistake. They looked like the first shot was right to, to his heart. So it's amazing that the wadding actually ended up, inside the wound. It's amazing. Somebody was not messing around.
It didn't actually go into the chest cavity, but traveled beneath the skin and through the muscle and fat before exiting the left axillary. Okay, so it's kind of a straight, kind of left to right, right to left shot. And
just real quick, when you say right to left, you're talking about Paul's right to left.
yeah, that's right. So I'm always thinking about like the patient's right to left, Okay, it's not, if we look at it, it's from, would be from left to right, but we always, for consistency, it's always relative to his body.
Down here by the hands, could you put an R on one side and an L on the other,
Yeah,
just
sure.
because I know I get confused?
Yeah, no, it is, and honestly, we all do this during autopsies as well, because especially we have the back, and it's very easy to make a mistake.
And also, just real quick, could you write Paul up at the top there? All right, thank you. All right.
Okay.
All right, so you were talking about that first shotgun wound to the chest and where it exited. Were there
Yes.
any other injuries associated with that? Please continue on.
Yes, so remember we have wadding and closing pellets. The wadding actually got stuck, didn't completely exit and continue to fly out. It got stuck right underneath the skin of the left side of the chest, like close to the armpit area. And we have a photograph of that pink wadding that remained in the skin of the exit wound.
Now let me give you some let me give you some context here as we see Murdaugh. He's a hunter. He's a hunter. He knows what these firearms are. He knows the kind of tissue damage they cause. I think what we're seeing today is authentic. There has been some days where he kind of was rocking and trying to pretend he was, well, I'm going to say he was pretending, but it looked like to me there were no tears, but he was, kind of going through the motions of crying. Today was a little bit different. It got really intense for a while, and they say if they don't have a runny nose, it's not really crying. There's a lot of people that can fake tears, but it's really hard to fake that stuffed up, running nose that is typical of authentic crying. And he really had a tough time today. Whether he did it or not, I think part of what he was experiencing was he knows the damage. He knows what the firearms, what they're capable of doing to, a hog or a buck, a large animal. So he knows what it did to his family members.
Multiple of the shotgun pellets started going through like the left arm, okay, starting from the underside of the left arm. So the wadding terminated in the skin, and then pellets kind of went out and went through the left arm. Okay, so this is the left, remember this is his left side, his left shoulder, his left arm. And then we've got a bunch of exit pellet wounds on the left side of the arm, and some also a little bit on the back. So that, you can see this is going through, and then this is actually on the inside of the arm, and the exits are kind of on the left side. So,
Was there any stippling associated with this particular wound?
yes, okay, so there was stippling, and I'll draw that over here, okay? So when a projectile comes out of the barrel of a weapon, be it a shotgun, a handgun, an assault rifle, what propels that projectile, we call, projectile out of the barrel of the gun? Okay, it's gunpowder, and gunpowder is basically ignited through the action of the shooter on the gun, and so gunpowder is basically burning and projects the projectile out of the barrel of the gun. A projectile can potentially travel a very long distance, like many feet, or yards, or along, depending on the projectile, until it hits something. Or if it doesn't hit anything, it could eventually lose power and go to the ground. But the gunpowder that leaves the barrel of the weapon can travel not too far. It only travels about up to 3 feet, depending on the weapon. So in this case, we actually have some particles of like abrasions from particles of gunpowder. And this is called gunpowder stippling. Okay, so we have stippling, which indicates that this wound was fired at a fairly close range. We can't say exactly, but probably no more than 3 feet, because that's our standard, could be anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Interestingly enough, there were some markings on the edge of this kind of cookie cutter type of defect from the wadding going in that shows that some of the petals of the wadding are beginning to open. So this is very classic for a shotgun entrance wound, and at the autopsy shows that it went, after going through the underneath the left side of the chest, it went through the left arm.
All right. And let me ask you this, and before we look at some of the pictures, which are very graphic, is that correct?
Yes, it's just the nature of the beast.
Okay. If this particular injury, was it immediately fatal?
No, amazingly enough, this really, if that was all he sustained, he would have needed medical attention and some stitches and irrigation of the wound to clean it out, to make sure it doesn't get infected. But it actually did not pierce the chest or cause any internal bleeding. It did, however, cause a bruise or contusion of the left lung, and that's because there's a lot of energy associated with this, but didn't actually go through the ribs, but caused a contusion of the left lung. But he would have been expected to continue to be standing after this. It would not have sent him to the ground.
All right. If you could, there's a dowel stick over by your witness stand, and I'm going to make sure the jurors down here can see what you're talking about. If you could grab that for me real quick, and then we'll look at some of the pictures here in a second.
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Well, I just wanted to show it to these jurors down here, just to make sure they can see
sure.
what you were
Okay.
doing. And
Okay.
then if you could just stay standing for me, I'm going to give them a bit of a stay back real quick, Dr. Ruth. It's 472.
Graph.
All right.
Trying
Case
to,
478, 479, 480, 481, and 482 in evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted without objection.
All right. Now, Dr. Ream, if you get the dowel stick and come around here to this screen, I'm going to put this first image up on the Elmo, and then if you could, we'll talk a little bit about these injuries and describe the jury.
Okay. So we can see, it's not great focus here, but this is the entrance shotgun wound on the left side of the chest. His left nipple is over here. So it's the left side of the chest. And there is some stippling
And
around
Dr.
it.
Ream, I apologize.
Okay.
If you could come around and work this
And
way so that all our
imagine-
jurors are...
In this direction,
Imagine-
remember?
if it was in fact Murdaugh who did this, imagine being face to face with your child, right? I mean, I've said before that I kind of feel like he got angry and blamed Paul for his financial downfall, that he had done all of the shady, underhanded business dealings, trying to prepare and save his fortune, with the whole boat case going through, and that he had learned that day that the company, the firm, knew that he was stealing. He knew that he had built a house of cards. He knew it was all coming tumbling down. And I think it's really notable that on that day at work, they challenged him. On that day, he knew that the jig is up. I somehow think that he must have held Paul responsible, and that it was an act of definitely deep passion. That he was very angry, and that he he basically said, you know, you caused this, you created this, and now we lose everything. Everything will be gone because of you and what you did with the Mallory Beach thing. But in reality, Paul didn't do all this. Alec Murdaugh did it by being more concerned about money and financial standing and power in the community than simply taking account and doing what he should have done. That he knew his son was drinking that night. He saw him at the party before they got in the boat. He allowed them to drive off. He knew Buster Murdaugh gave Paul a fake ID. He willingly and intentionally gave Paul the fake ID. So, you know, I'm not saying that he's right, that it was Paul's fault. In no way was it Paul's fault, other than he was 100% responsible for the boat wreck that killed Mallory. But Alec is responsible for the financial destruction of not only his own personal life and family finances, but also the utter destruction of the law firm, the family legacy. That belongs to Alec Murdaugh because he was a thief. He was corrupt. But I think for him, in the moment, he was freaked out. He may have been taking some kind of drug, and he exploded and perhaps held Paul, maybe even Maggie, responsible. Or he lashed out at Paul, and then he was forced to end Maggie's life. It does seem like to me, when I watch this, it does seem like to me he tends to get far more emotional when they're talking about Maggie than when they talk about Paul. Even on other days, not just today, but on all the other days, it seemed like when they're talking about Maggie's death and wounds, it seems like the tears are real. When they're talking about Paul, it's different. He's rocking, but there's not sobbing, you know, and all that. So I can see a situation where he lashed out, and once he killed Paul, he didn't have a choice but to, you know, end Maggie's life.
It exited that left side of the chest and then continued through the left arm. So that is a photograph of that wound, to the shotgun wound to the chest.
All right. And we'll see some more close-up images here in a minute, but this is the entrance wound right here, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we have some injuries right here. Is that where those
Yes.
petals exited
That
into the
is
arm?
where the wadding, which is the plastic piece enclosing the pellets, terminated in the skin. It just didn't manage to get out. But all those pellets kind of got released from the wadding and went through the left arm.
I'm going to move, that was states 478 for the record. I'm going to move now to states 479. And what is this image?
Okay, so this is a more close-up view of the entrance wound. And you can see that it looks like there's little, almost squares or pegs sticking out of the edge. And that tells us that the wadding is starting to open. Because it opens up, it kind of opens up, there's petals. And this is a classic. I could put it in a book to say that this is consistent with a shotgun entrance wound. Okay, and we can see the dots around here. Those are from pieces of gunpowder that have basically impacted the skin because it's within a distance of 3 feet or so.
Moving now to states 480.
Okay, so usually when I take a photo, I don't want to go too close because then you won't be able to see where it is on the body. But here, this is recognized, this is the nipple, right? His left nipple. And we saw the entrance wound over here. And so here we have the, this is an exit wound where this pink wadding is basically stuck right there. And you can see these are the petals on the edge, and that's what gave that unique appearance to the entrance wound. Now, this is basically a cylinder that encloses lots of pellets. And then the pellets, here we start to actually have some of the pellets coming through the surrounding skin and then along the left side of the lateral side of the chest, kind of below the armpit.
All right, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 111, already in evidence at this time. Do you recognize that?
Yes, so that is the wadding that I recovered at autopsy and took a picture of it before I recovered it, so that's the wadding that was from Paul's chest.
And just again, just point that where that is in that image, please.
Yeah, so here it is. It's kind of peeking out through this big hole in the left side of the chest.
All right, let me move on to the next exhibit. I'm going to put up on the screen now States 481. And tell me what this image
Okay, so this is a photograph of the same wadding, but I'm taking it from a different angle, okay? So he's lying on an autopsy table, and I've moved his arm up to show the relationship of this wadding with the entrance pellet wounds on the underside, the underside of the left arm. And interestingly enough, a lot of times pellets just go through the skin, but here we have some abrasions around the skin, and it actually corresponds to abrasions. We normally don't have abrasions with an exit wound such as we have here, but the fact that we have abrasions on the underside of the left side of the chest corresponding to the inside of the arm indicates that his arm was down at the time of this injury.
So let me ask you about that. In your expert opinion.
And notice that the computer screen is covered, so unless he looks up at the larger screen, this all is covered. He can't see it. So he does a pretty good job keeping his eyes averted. He does look when it is Maggie's autopsy.
Opinion, having done 5,500 autopsies, is there any way that Paul's hands were up when he suffered that shotgun wound to the chest that you've been talking about?
No, the autopsy answers that question, that his arm was down by his side at the time he sustained this injury.
And again, highlight the specific features that you observed that caused you to come to that expert opinion.
So let's just say hypothetically, if his arm...
And so Paul never knew what was coming. He didn't have time to react. He didn't have time to put his hands up or to turn away. He was completely taken by surprise. And in some ways that's a blessing, right? Because the idea of a son looking at his dad or family member knowing he was about to die, it's pretty chilling. But in this particular autopsy, this pathologist doesn't believe that he really knew what was happening.
Kind of going to push the skin before it actually exits. The skin's going to stretch a lot, and if it hits up against the other portion of the skin, we have kind of abrasions, which are kind of scrapes on the skin around where it exited as well as where it entered. So these are sometimes called it's a shored exit wound. So the skin actually struck another area, and in fact it corresponds exactly. It's like a reflection. We can see this is reflected. This one is reflected over here. So if we can only get that kind of a mark if his arm is down. Now this is the kind of thing that is the logical conclusion, and I'm confident that was the position of his arm at the time he was shot. And this is based on my training and more than 20 years of experience doing these cases.
All right, let me look at the next exhibit, which will be 482 for the record. And tell us what you see here, and also, if you could, how that also supports the conclusions you were just talking about to the
Yes.
jury.
Okay, so these are the exit pellet wounds on the outside of the arm in this area, right? So this is kind of like his armpit here. And we can see these are kind of just, these pellet exit wounds don't have the kind of abrasions around it. This is just kind of finding its way through the skin. And then this one is over here. So, and if the further the pellets travel, it kind of splays out. So after the pellets leave the wadding that is open, there's spread. So, but these are, exit pellet wounds, and we don't have the kind of abrasions to suggest that his arm is pressed up against anything at the time that those pellets exited.
All right. One other thing as well is when talking about his arm being down, of course, the wadding.
Okay, so you can just see the very top of Buster's head here. He's kind of hiding behind this woman that is wearing the mask. This is his, let's say his mate, live-in / common law wife, whatever, she's an attorney. And then this is John Marvin, and this is John Marvin's wife. So they're all kind of just taking up the whole, and then this is Alec's sister. So the family's sort of just taking up this whole pew. Watch Buster though. There's no question that Alec is awash in a lot of complicated emotion. I mean, you can watch him and tell there's a lot going on behind his eyes. But watch Buster's reaction. I'd be curious to see what you think about how he reacts.
Stopped in that wound still in his chest, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Just give me 1 second here to get some other exhibits and show them to defense counsel.
And I believe this guy right here, I believe that's Randy Murdaugh. I believe that's now like the patriarch of the family, right? And it's notable because nobody ever talks to him. He sits right there by himself. Nobody speaks. Of course, he's a legal giant, in South Carolina and Washington, D.C. He's got stuff going on in Washington, D.C. So he looks pretty angry today about the whole thing. So this is a bad day for.
All right, Dr. Reamer, if I could get you
this
maybe to stand
family.
that way just a little bit. I know we're in tight confines, and then we're trying to be as respectful as we can with these images. States 485, and then I want to go back to the board before we talk about it.
I recognize these.
All right, and those
Look how
autopsy
angry
photographs that
he
you
is.
took of
Yes.
Paul Murdaugh,
These are photographs that I took at the autopsy of Palmer.
and would they assist you and explain to the jury the injuries that he suffered?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I'd move states 483, 484, 485, 486, and 487 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They are admitted.
And Your Honor, I think all these exhibits, both he and I, 90% of them were introduced, will be under
Did you
seal.
see that? Buster is eating. Watch him.
7 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They are admitted.
And Your Honor,
Okay, watch him.
all these
Watch him.
exhibits, both he and I,
He's eating.
90% of them were introduced, will be under seal.
Yes, sir, and
He's eating. They're showing photographs of his dead brother with the gaping shotgun wounds. Shot at such close range with large gauge pellets that the inside of the cartridge actually penetrated the skin, something that's fairly rare. He's eating. He's eating. It reminds me of Chris Watts.
And for the record, these are under seal, and I provided the cover sheets to the court reporter. Every exhibit except for the poster board that we're doing, the state would request to be under seal because of their graphic nature. All right, Dr. Reamer, let's, that was, and we'll come back a little bit more to that first injury, but there was a second shotgun injury as well, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and I'm going to go back to States 500, which is the poster board, and if you could.
I'm a little surprised by Alec. In the beginning, he was really rocking, like you were looking at him and it was pronounced, and you're thinking, okay, well, you know, he does some stimming. Maybe he's a little bit on the spectrum. Although socially, he seems, you know, to be far more competent than that. But you know, maybe. At this point now, this is the worst day so far of this whole 14, 15 day, you know, trial to now. The rocking is nearly gone. So was all the rocking that we previously saw, especially the first week, was that all pretend? Was that him trying to manipulate the jury? I don't know.
Could explain to and draw on this diagram that second injury, and then
Okay.
we'll look at the pictures.
So there was a large shotgun wound defect to the top of his left shoulder. And there were lots of pellets recovered in the left shoulder area. And from there, it kind of just went across the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the neck and face. Okay? And from there, his face actually was not destroyed from this, but there's a big exit wound on the top of the right side of the head. So this wound went from his left toward his right and upward, and with a slight front to back deviation. Now, what does that tell us? We don't really know. It's kind of going toward, it's sparing his face, it's going behind the face. Now, one thing that makes sense to me, how could that happen? If he was just standing, not everybody gets shot like standing like these diagrams, right? But if he was shot and his face was forward, it would have taken off a lot of his face. However, if he is turned toward the shooter, then it's going to go into the face here and go out toward the right back of the head. So to me, it makes sense that his head is turned to the left. Not necessarily completely, but partially turned to the left. And what happened here was an extremely severe, immediately fatal injury, because what it did was that after it went through the left side of the neck and face, our brain is basically held up through the skull. So we have bone at the top of the skull, but then we also have a bone that kind of holds up the brain. It went through the base of the skull, okay, which is kind of like in this area, the brain is up there. And this wound, actually, his brain was ejected out of the top of the right side of his head and actually arrived at the autopsy in a separate bucket.
And that's
So
devastating,
this-
right?
the
That's
force of this
devastating to
wound,
know about your loved one.
Actually pushed the brain out of his head. There was only just a small piece of brain remaining, and that's the brain stem that was attached to the spinal cord.
All right, and real quickly, going back to the first wound to the chest, if Paul was standing when he suffered that, could he have remained standing after suffering that wound?
Yes.
All right. The second wound, the one that starts in the shoulder and goes in here and then out the top of his head, what would have been the effect of that wound?
Instant death.
That would have been immediately fatal, and he would not have been standing.
Yeah.
He would have just fallen to the ground.
Yeah.
All right, and would he have been capable at all of bracing his fall or
No.
anything like that with a catastrophic injury like that?
No, that's instantaneous death.
All right. Did you notice any abrasions on his face or anything like that?
Yes, he did have, and it's depicted in one of the photographs. He does have a kind of a scrape on his face, and very frequently scrapes on the face that it has a slight directionality. It's consistent with a terminal collapse. So if he's hitting the ground with some movement, there's frequently kind of a linear pattern. And, you know, all of this really makes sense. Once you see these things, you can understand that if somebody's going to fall with, you know, the force of their body and not, they're going to hit their face on the ground, and we get some abrasions that correspond to that.
All right. And let me do this real quick. If you could grab that dowel stick for me, and I'm going to make sure the jurors down here had a chance to see what you've been drawing.
Okay.
So that's the shoulder right
Yeah.
there, and then
Yeah, I should have made a red mark here to be consistent. This is the exit wound on the right side of the tongue.
a little bit to one side. If you could use the dowel stick, maybe use me as an example and show me kind of what you're talking about. You can
Okay.
position me however you want to.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go out here just a little
So
bit if we can.
we'll start with like a different idea, okay? In order to understand how that's the case, so if a shotgun wound is entering the top of the left shoulder, and let's say his head is turned like that, it's going to go right through the face, right? But if his head is turned like that, it's going to spare the face and be able to go behind the face. So if somebody's just standing looking straight ahead, this most likely would have done a lot of damage to his face. But the fact that the face is remained intact tells me that his head was, I don't know, up and down, but his head was facing in the direction from
Very
where
interesting.
The shotgun was being fired.
And then the injury to the shoulder would have been where, if you just point with it?
Yes, so it's kind of on the top of the shoulder. This also did not injure his chest cavity. It kind of went through a lot of the skin and muscle and fat of the left shoulder. And there were a lot of pellets that were recovered from the left
really sad,
shoulder
isn't it?
area, as
It's
well
really
as
tragic.
the head and neck.
And I'm going to show you very quickly what's been marked as
But it-
states 110. And
That second
This one?
shot,
yeah, if you could work on.
that second shot through the brainstem, that was a humane, put him out of his misery shot, right? So, you know, I thought about that. Again, it just seems like someone, I mean, you're not going to survive a shotgun blast directly to your heart, which is essentially, you know, kind of what he experienced. But it didn't like penetrate all the way. But he would have bled to death. But it would have been painful. It would have been longer, right? So when that second shot was fired, it ended. I mean, it just like flipping a switch off, and he was over. So there was no more fear, no more suffering. So was it an act of humanity? Was it a move to provide, you know, humane relief from what was happening? Maybe. And then it becomes very interesting to watch Murdaugh when they begin to talk about Maggie's wounds, because she was shot 5 times.
On this side so that the jurors down on that end can see, and I'm going to look at some of these. All right, and I'm going to show you first what's been marked as states 483. And can you tell me what's on this particular image, particularly as to some of the things you were just describing as to abrasion and things like that?
Yes, so
So you notice how the people in the gallery back here, how they're craning their necks and looking. They're trying to look at the computer screens that are showing the photographs, right? So even though they're not displaying the photos to the gallery for everybody to look at, the computer screens have them up for the lawyers and the jury and for the people that are, you know, there. So that I get that, you know, they're not handing out copies of these photos for sure, but if you're sitting in the right place, you can see them.
We can see this is basically an abrasion, is a fancy word for scrape. So there are scrapes on the right side of his face. And you can see they kind of have, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of linearity. So if he just fell completely flat, we might just get like, you know, dots. But if there's some movement, we get, it's kind of, he's hitting the ground and then moving it a little bit as his face hits. So we get this kind of vertical direction. And this is a very typical type of injury to the face that somebody might suffer from a terminal collapse. So after they sustained a fatal injury, what are they going to do? They're going to fall to the ground. Now, depending on the surface of, you know, if it's concrete or, you know, grass, we might get some. But this is very typical of, you know, I don't know what kind of surface it was, but a terminal collapse.
Okay. All right, if you would, with this image, and this would be stage 484, please explain to the jury using this image some of the concepts that you've been
Okay.
Yeah,
describing.
let me turn
So
up my
this is the
microphone.
top of his left shoulder.
Oh, it did
and,
get turned down. Sorry about that.
This is the continuation of
Is that
the
better?
ammunition through the left side of the lower face. And from there, it proceeded behind the face through the base of the skull and exited the right side of the top of the head. And sort of toward the back of the right side of the top.
And those two sort of together, they are, that's kind of what you described before when you had positioned my head in
Yes.
the manner in which you
Yeah,
did.
that's right. So now if you turn to the left like that.
I agree,
I
Cecil
think that makes
Silva.
the most logical sense, and forensic pathology is really logical. So when we look at these things, we have to think, well, how could this have happened? And, you know, after the...
Is that better?
It's not always immediately obvious, but, you know, with some thought, we can come to these conclusions with confidence.
Turning now to stage 485. So it's just another perspective.
Yes, so this is the same injury. This is formed by a single piece of ammunition here that went through the top of the left shoulder. It tore it up, right? And then went into the left side of his
Thank you.
face and
Okay,
neck.
sorry
And some
about
of
that.
these pellets also did a lot of damage in the neck because they kind of splay out as they go further. And some of them went actually through his airway and other structures of the neck, as well as continuing through the base of the skull and propelling the majority of the brain out the right side of the back of the head.
So trophy hunters, like deer hunters, elk, whatever, if they're hoping to, if this is an animal they're hoping to, you know, have it mounted or whatever, or if it's a smaller deer and they're going to use the meat, you know, they're going to eat, they don't want the metal in the meat. They don't want it spreading out inside the meat, and so they're careful with what they use, and if they're a good shot, then they'll take something like a 300 blackout and they can pinpoint on the deer exactly what she's talking about with Paul, the brain stem. And if you can clip the brain stem is what we call the old brain, and it is the mechanism that houses all of your instinctive behavior. You can't breathe without it. It tells your heart to beat, and so to destroy the brainstem is instant end of life. There's no awareness that what has happened. It's just a light switch that goes off. And I believe like snipers, military people, I think they do call they call it a trigger or a switch? I think they call it a switch, actually. and so they'll aim for that the same mechanism that is on a deer, so that they can preserve the head or the meat or whatever, you know. But you got to be a really good shot, you know, to make that shot. But the I think the takeaway from it is it was an act of humanity, because it ended his suffering and his fear. I mean, I recognize that the first shot created the suffering and fear. I know, but they could have just as easily walked away and not fired the second shot, and he still would have been dead. It just would have been a bit longer in time, and by making that shot, I think it was done intentionally to end the pain and fear.
Okay.
And now going to the sort of the end of that particular one, tell us what this image
Okay,
represents.
so, you know, you can kind of see, it looks like this piece of his head.
I
We're
know,
not really
Tennessee,
seeing the
it's a
entire
horrifying
thing
thought.
because his
Horrifying.
forehead is basically still intact. But you can appreciate at this point that, you know, the contours of his skull are disrupted. And that's because there's a defect at the top of the skull, but not involving the forehead, so it's kind of in the back. So we know it started at the shoulder, it's ending in the back, so his head may have been like that, facing toward the left.
Short record, that was stage 486, and finally stage 487.
Okay, now this is, all right, so this is,
I can't.
Yes.
It's hard for me to see what I'm doing.
it's
but-
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is actually a photograph of the right side of, this is his, the face area, okay? And I know that because I usually, when I take a photograph of the number, I usually have head, sort of see, this is the right side of his head, and it's horrible, I know, on the side of the.
All right, Dr. Raymer, if you would. That's all the images I have right now.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
To the jury room for a few moments. Please not discuss the case.
I think that the prosecution wanted this witness to be very graphic. That he kept asking for the same description. He's asking in a different way, right? But it always gets back to the brain is outside of the skull, the side of the face, back of the head is complete devastation. Why do I think that the prosecutor wanted her to do that? I think they were trying to get a reaction from Murdaugh. I think they wanted him to break down. Now, why would they do that? Well, I would watch him break down, and I might have this reaction that he's suffering, he's in pain, it's his child. But if you're already watching him and you're already thinking in your mind, yeah, he did it. It's a horrible thing, but it's more likely probable he did do it. And you see him break down, you might see that and think it's guilt, right? It might be the cherry on the cake of the day. I still think it's a little bit dangerous for a prosecutor to do that because there's a lot of people really high in empathy that would see the same exact thing and not think guilt. They would look at it and think he's grieving his child. No way did he kill his child. Look how sad he is. So I think it was a dangerous game. It might maybe not work out like he had hoped, but at the end of the day, he did control himself. I don't know how he did, but he did. And I do happen to think he did it. See his lip? Do you see his lip quivering? Watch his bottom lip, because that's hard to fake. That is very hard to fake. Watch. Oh, it looks real. See that? Do you see that? That is hard to do, man. Annie's got real tears. If you look right there, you'll see a real tear right there. I don't know. It looks and it could be guilt. He could actually be reliving that moment, you know, when he lost his temper, or he finished out his plan, if that's what it was. But whatever, you know, he's experiencing, I think this time I think it's authentic. Not every time, but I think this time it is. But is it guilt, or is it, you know, anger that someone hurt his child, or is he, you know, just sad? Maybe sad that he made so many terrible mistakes, screwed things up so badly, you know? Maybe that's what he's living with. How could I do that? How could I put my family in such a precarious situation? How did I feel like that was the only choice I had? How did I, you know, do that? I don't remember how long their break is. Hold on. Here we go. I love this judge. He has such a kind face.
You may now be seated.
You may bring the jury.
The jury is present, sir.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. May it please the court. Dr. Raymond.
We can see Buster right there.
Before we took a break, we were obviously discussing the very catastrophic injuries from that second shotgun wound to Paul, and that would have been immediately fatal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let me ask you this very quickly. Do you
Let me see if I can get in here so we can see old Buster Boy a little bit better. All right.
see any evidence of any defensive wounds on Paul?
No, I did not.
Can you describe quickly what a defensive wound is, and then explain why you see none in this particular instance for this?
Yes, so
He's
a
still
defensive
eating.
wound is, you know, sometimes somebody might sustain injuries that suggest that they had their hands or arms up while trying to defend themselves from from what is about to happen. And I don't see anything on his hands that would indicate, you know, he had his hands up to his face in anticipation of the injury that was about to happen. So,
And in your expert opinion, as you described it to the jury before, his arm was down for that first shot.
yes, so that first shot, his arm was down, and I don't see any evidence of injury to his hands from the second wound.
And then that abrasion on his face is consistent with that second shot and him just having terminal
Right,
collapse.
so falling to the ground, hitting the right side of his face on the ground with a little bit of forward movement, so we got that kind of linearity, and that would be consistent with collapsing to the ground after, it's very frequently, people, you know, after sustaining any kinds of disabling injuries, if they're standing up, they're going to fall, just gravity. And so he fell, and he was face down at the time, so he had a scrape on the cheek, which is the surface of his body that impacted the ground.
What were the toxicology results on Paul, if any?
Yes, so-
Anything that he might have had in his system?
Oh, yes. So every person that has an autopsy at MUSC, and everybody gets a full toxicology testing done. MUSC does not actually perform toxicology, but toxicology was sent to a toxicology lab that tests for any possible substances that may be in the blood, and the only thing he had in the blood at the time of his death was caffeine.
No alcohol or drugs.
So to me, that was notable because I had been seeing people in different chats. I go to Emily D. Baker and I go to Peter Tragos. And I've been seeing some conversation where people had thought maybe Alec drugged the Paul and Maggie, and that's how he was able to complete the act with both people, being the only person there. Both Paul and Maggie, no substances, only caffeine. So that still goes along with my idea that this wasn't something that was mapped out and plotted out in a really intricate fashion, that it was more of being overwhelmed by the pressures that he was facing financially and professionally and legally, and having a temper tantrum, holding Paul responsible for all of it, including his own bad behavior, and he acted out. He was like a petulant child who, slapped the ice cream out of his mom's hand. So, that he just did it in the moment, quick. He was irritated with the dog and the chicken, remember? It's terrible. It's terrible, like Shakespeare. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy.
No alcohol or drugs. It was negative.
Were you able to reach any conclusion about the order in
Me
which
too,
Paul
Sizzle.
suffered these shotgun blasts?
Okay. Well, in my opinion, based on my education and experience, the first shotgun wound, the initial shot was to the chest, following which he remained standing and sustained the other gunshot wound to the top of the left shoulder and head. If we think about it, well, is it possible that the other one was first? It just kind of defies logic, right? So if he got that one first on the left shoulder and through his head, we know that one sent him to the ground. So he fell to the ground, hit the right side of the face. How is he possibly going to get that one to the front of the chest? So it's just hard to imagine a scenario in which the shotgun wound to the head was first.
Let's move now, if we can, to Maggie Murdaugh. And you did her autopsy as well as you described as jury, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
All right. And how many gunshot wounds, just very quickly, did you
Okay, so notice
observe,
that Alec is
on
shaking.
Maggie?
You see him shaking? You go see his brother have a really strong reaction to this. There's fury in his face when they get into talking about what happened to Maggie. But, for now, Murdaugh is trembling. I think Maggie was harder for him. That's another reason that I think that he had anger at Paul and he lashed out at Paul and held, in his mind, rationalized and held Paul responsible for all that went wrong. But I think the real regret is with Maggie.
So she sustained a total of 5 gunshot wounds from a minimum of 4 shots. So it could have been from 4 shots with 5 wounds or 5 separate shots. And I will explain once we do that. Go through.
I have what's been marked as states 501, and I guess is another diagram that would assist you in explaining these
Yes,
injuries to
so
the
this
jury.
is the female or the woman diagram, and and this is what I used to take notes while I performed the autopsy.
All right. if you would step down, please, and walk over here, and we'll do the same procedure with Maggie. If you could start out by writing her name at the top, and then put the
Okay.
They're just
All right,
putting like right side, left
Let me
side.
do this just very quickly. I apologize. And this is Paul, is that correct?
Yes.
And you had an arrow right here kind of showing the direction of shot number 1, is that
Yes.
right? Can you do an arrow for shot number
Sure.
2, please? And Your Honor, this time I'd move States 500 into evidence for demonstrative purposes. Or move it into evidence.
Is he gonna just use it for demonstrative purposes, or is he moving it into evidence?
I'm moving it into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
Let's admit it without objection.
To 501, this would be Maggie, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, if you could start to detail the injuries that you observed to Maggie in what is the most probable order based on your review of
Okay.
the evidence?
Well, first of all, this was a different weapon. It was not a shotgun with wadding and pellets. These injuries that Maggie sustained were from completely consistent with an assault rifle. Okay, so it's a different weapon. And I'm going to go through the 5 wounds, and then we'll think about how I'll try to explain my opinion as to the likely order, just sort of like we figured out Paul's shotgun wound to the chest came first, but we'll do the same with her. But she's got a few more wounds, so it could be a little bit more, require a little bit more logical thinking.
And I got to tell you, what Maggie experienced was far more horrifying than what Paul experienced. I mean, Paul, it was horrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing. It was a horrific nightmare. But he got that second shot, and it was very quick, right? Maggie wasn't so lucky. I don't know why it's not going. There we go.
Okay,
Sorry
so
about
she
that.
had an entrance wound that was right over there. Okay, it's kind of right below the rib cage, not far from the middle of her midline of her body. And that wound, okay, now we're going to remember, you know, this is right and left. It's very easy to get the right-left situation confused, but that's going from front to back and downward, and there was an exit wound kind of like right down here. Okay, so it entered here. Okay, so we're in a kind of downward direction. It was actually 10 inches below where it entered, so it's pretty low. You know, down here was the exit wound, and on the way, that projectile, that bullet, went through the abdominal wall. That's like our muscle and all that. And then once it got inside the body, it went through mesentery, which is the supportive tissues of our intestines. So it went through mesentery, has all the blood vessels and lymphatics, all that stuff that supports our intestines. The intestines take up a lot of room in there. Now it's continuing to go toward the back of her body, went through the pancreas, okay, which is kind of toward the back. And then as it's traveling left, it went through the left kidney and left iliac artery, which is a blood vessel that leads off the aorta.
See, I don't think they had to go to that level of detail. I think this was done at the request of the prosecutor. I mean, you can give detail without creating this very vivid visual. And she's going to talk about the level of pain, right? It's almost like the prosecutor wanted to torture Alec, maybe to get him to break. Maybe. What do y'all think?
Or exiting the left side of the back.
All right. And let's go ahead, can we do the second wound, and then we'll talk about both of those together in a
Okay.
second, if we could,
So,
please.
we've got two that are basically completely to the front of the body, directly to the front. And there's another wound that's kind of on the front inside of the left thigh, kind of like over there, okay? And this one is also going from front to back and toward the left and downward. So these two shots follow a parallel path. They're both, this is the left, okay, left leg, right, left thigh, and the exit wound was in the back of the left thigh, and it actually, this is a little bit too high, okay, I should, but it was lower
Put
down.
that X through
Yeah.
the wrong one.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so it's traveling a downward direction and also with a kind of a slight right to left. So I'm going to draw an arrow to indicate the direction, okay? So that one's going like that. And then this one is also
That's what I
going in the
think,
same
Carol.
direction, downward toward the back.
All right. And those, you said, followed kind of a parallel trajectory?
Yes, they had a relatively parallel trajectory. Another feature of each of these wounds is that, remember we talked about gunpowder stippling when somebody is shot at a relatively close range. Well, both of these wounds had gunpowder stippling around them, okay? All right.
And
Now-
go ahead, and remind the jury what stippling indicates about probable distance from a
Yeah, so
firearm.
within 3 feet. You don't usually see it any more than 3 feet. Sometimes it's within 2 feet, but depending on the firearm, I can't say exactly, but it's somewhere in that range,
It's a fairly close range of parallel trajectories for these two
Right.
wounds.
Okay.
Is that
And-
correct?
Yes.
All right.
And they both exited the left side of the body. One was on the, this is her left leg. It's really easy to get turned around here, okay? Left thigh, and the other's on the left side of the lower back. And the one to the left leg actually just went through muscle and soft tissue, didn't actually break a bone.
All right. If those two wounds, let's go ahead and do all the wounds. Can we go to the next wound that we have? And before we do that, was there a wound to the wrist in this particular instance?
Yes, there was a wound to the wrist, and it was on the left wrist. The entrance wound was somewhere around here. And, okay, so this is her left wrist, and then the exit wound was a little bit higher on the inside of the arm. So this is the kind of the hairy part, this part, and then the inside where there was an exit wound.
All right, and using my left hand, can you kind of point generally to the jury about the location of those?
Yeah, so kind of going in here and out there.
All right. All right, so that's 3 gunshot injuries at this point, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, now tell me about the fourth one, if you would,
Okay.
please.
So the fourth one was somewhat unusual because it's going in an upward direction through the body, okay? There was an entrance wound on the underside of the left breast that exited like the top of the left breast, okay? And from there, we have some marks there's like bruising on the left side of the chest up here, the left clavicle, and that bullet continued through the underside of the left side of the face, okay? So there's a wound kind of like over there, okay? And everything is kind of going up. So this was an exit, and then we have like a re-entrance, okay? So we have a series of defects. This is an entrance, an exit, and then the bullet continued through the left side of the face and lower ear area and into her head. Okay, now in addition to
And
that,
just real quick, those first two wounds that you described, the wound to the abdomen and the wound to the leg, and those were both to the front of the body, is that correct?
Correct.
And they both had a similar parallel trajectory, is that correct?
Yes.
Would either one of those wounds have been immediately fatal?
no,
All right. The wound you just described, and how about the wound to the wrist? Would that have been immediately
No.
fatal? What about the wound that you just described that went in near the breast and then went into the head?
yes, that would have been immediately fatal, because when it entered the left side of the face, it basically destroyed the brain.
And was there another gunshot injury, traumatic gunshot injury aside from that one?
Yes, but I'm going to, before I continue, I did want to mention that there was an abrasion, kind of a scrape, below that, which indicate, below her left breast. So it indicates before it actually went through the left breast, it kind of scraped along the abdomen as it was going upward before it went into her head.
On the injury, the gunshot wound, the assault rifle wound to the abdomen and the assault rifle wound to the leg, you said there was stippling there, is that correct?
Yes, the
Did you-
other wounds did not have any stippling,
Right,
so
so
they
they-
were from further back.
The wrist wound had no stippling?
Correct.
And that wound that you just described going up into Maggie's head, that did not have any stippling either?
Correct,
All right. And you mentioned there's one more as well to her head, is that correct?
yes.
All right, describe that to the jury using this chart, please, or this diagram.
So there was an entrance wound to the back of the head, okay, that was kind of like right over there, okay, and it's kind of near the base of her skull, and that was going downward, okay. Now this is like automatic rifle, it's a rifle ammunition, so it's not a single, cylindrical projectile that remains intact. These rifles, the projectiles fragment as they go through the body. That's one of the mechanisms by which they do enormous damage. Okay. Now this wound was going in a downward direction, and then we have lots of exit wounds on the right side of her upper back where all of those fragmented projectiles, fragments, exited. And this wound, it's in a clearly downward direction. It entered the back of her head, went through the back of the skull, and through the brainstem and cerebellum. Okay, so these are vital portions.
So what is that? There again, that's act of humanity, right? That's the kill shot. That's, if you're a hunter, that's what you're aiming for. You want to cut the cord right there and destroy the old brain. So it's just so interesting that with Maggie, there was a need for so many shots to be fired. Why was that? Was he conflicted? Was he not sure what to do? The fact that the first two shots were really in the hip and the leg sort of suggests that he wasn't as closely intent on killing her, more than just sort of being instinctive, that she's running away and he's got to stop her so that she can't tell what he did. The next thing that this pathologist is going to talk about is the body position in order to get that trajectory on that bullet, that he puts the gun. The target is the brainstem, right? If you cut the brainstem, there's instant death. You're completely, no more pain, no more fear. It's over instantly. So the target was the brainstem, and because of the location, because of the position of her body, it entered. So he was probably looking at she was probably bent over, and he was looking at the top of her head, and so he pointed the gun at the brainstem, pulled the trigger, and the bone kind of bounced along the spinal cord before it came, before it all came fragmented and all came out. That is a horrifying thought. He was basically, she's going to go back through and she's going to kind of tell the story again without a lot of additional description. But basically, there was a couple of shots fired that stopped her. There was another shot that went through into her kidney that caused excruciating pain, that would have caused her to grab her stomach and bend over in pain. And then whoever did this was circling her body as he's shooting a couple more times. Was he talking to her? Was he raging at her? Was he crying and conflicted? There's no way to know. It could have been any of those. I could see him crying and begging for forgiveness, as he's doing this horrible thing.
At the very bottom of the brain, but it did not enter into her chest. It continued just scraping along the top of the back. So we know this is going in a downward direction. So how do we reconcile? How do we make sense of a wound that's going upward and then another wound that's going downward? Okay, you'll recall this wound that went through her left breast and into the left side of her face injured her brain, right? She's not going to be standing anymore. Now, how would this even go upward? Okay, those first two shots, right? The one to her, or we'll say the one to her, it's the right side of her abdomen. That went, remember, through her pancreas and the left kidney. Kidney pain is usually very painful. We can imagine this did not immediately cause. She may have been bent over straight, and that puts her in a position, if someone's bending over, leaning over, to get a gunshot wound that goes along. So when we look at her body in an upright position, and she's got a gunshot wound going upward, we know it's going upward because it ended in her head. Probably her body was bent over, and it may have been that she just sustained this very painful wound to her abdomen, not in addition to her thigh, and she was most likely, in my opinion, bent over or even possibly on the ground, but not completely lying flat, at the time, because then it would never have been able to go through the front, you have some like skip areas here. So if she's bent over, we have some skin folds, we're going to get a skip, plus it went through the underside of the left breast, exited the top of the left breast, so that would indicate that her breast may have been sort of, like hanging down a little bit.
All right, so do you have that dowel stick anywhere? Unless if you would, just, again, use me, if you could, just describe some of the concepts you're talking about. And let's start with those first two shots to the abdomen, and then just kind of position me as we move on to the shots.
All right, so one wound.
Stand over here if you
Okay,
would, so the jury can
absolutely.
see.
Okay. Well, now I have to kind of, I'll have to, yeah, I can't show this. Yeah, I'm going to show this. The entrance would be about there, right, top of the abdomen. And it went through the body, exiting on the left side of the lower back. Mm-hmm. And while it was in the body, went through the pancreas and the left kidney and a blood vessel nearby.
All right, and then the wound to the thigh.
Okay, the thigh was kind of on the front, but a little bit toward the inside area. And that exited lower down on the left thigh, in the back of the left thigh.
The one to the abdomen, would that have been very painful?
Yes, I mean, kidney, if you ever knew anybody that had a kidney stones are some of the worst pain in medicine. People who get a kidney stone have to be on very high doses of morphine just to control the pain. Well, she had like projectiles, ammunition going through her left kidney. We can imagine that was a very painful wound and may have caused her to like fold over in pain.
So it's something like this?
Yes.
All right. And could it even been that she went to the ground, she's on her hands and knees, something like this?
Yes, that's also possible, and she could have had her head bent down or like sort of touching the ground at that point as well.
This shot, this one right here, that you described right there, is there any way at that point in time she could have been completely prone, flat on the ground like this?
No, because then how, the bullet's not just going to go up. So she has to at least have been, I can't say for sure, but it makes sense that after receiving those first two shots, she's going to be bent over at least, or possibly, even lower to the ground, enabling her to get a wound.
And if you could, about
Yeah,
bent over,
like
could you
that,
do
that's
this?
perfect. Okay, going through the front of the left side of the chest, and if your head is bent over even further, you can imagine it's gonna go into the head like that. Okay, so when I first look at this, I'm like, what? It takes a little, but in retrospect, now that I've made sense of this, it all comes together. So,
So far at this point in time, we've talked about the abdomen and the thigh wound. In your opinion, are those two shots the first two shots she suffered?
yes, I think she was standing upright at the time, and then she only could have gotten the wound to the left side of, through the left side of the front into her head if she's horizontal but not completely on the ground. But after sustaining that wound, okay.
She could have been down on her hands and
Yeah,
knees
she could have been
too.
down on her hands and knees or just bent over, right? It went into her brain. She's gonna fall to the ground completely. And that puts her in a position to get the gunshot wound to the back of the head. I can't really, you
right.
might not, you're too far away for that.
Sorry, I'm gonna go over here, but show me that
Yeah,
last wound.
okay, so the last wound was going in a downward direction, entered here, and it's kind of, enough to fracture the skull and go through the back of the brain, which is like the brain stem, and then have just a bunch of exit wounds there. So that actually is in kind of a downward direction. So we've got something going upward, we have something going downward, and it only makes sense that the one to the left side of the front occurred first, because if the one to the back of the head was, she basically was already had injury to the brain sufficient to have killed her. The one to the back of the head that went down was, an additional wound, but the one entered the left side of the brain was already sufficient to have killed her.
If she had not suffered this wound right here, the one where she's hunched over her hands and knees, if she had not suffered that one, would this one to the back of the head also been immediately fatal?
Yes, either one of them would have been immediately fatal. That one went through the brain stem and the cerebellum. Those sections of the brain, their whole job is to keep us alive. They keep us breathing and set the cardiac rhythm, and without that, none of us would be here.
But in your opinion, abdomen and thigh is first. This one that went through her head is after that. And then this one is when she's prone on the ground to the back of the head.
Yes, so I
This is the
do
last
think,
one.
this isn't something that I, immediately like realized, but after thinking about it, how, this is gunshot wounds to one person, how do I make sense of this? And this is the most likely logical sequence of shots at
All right. Can you hear me now? Put a 1 if you can hear me now. Ah, good. Okay. Okay, so the reason it stopped is because I was talking. um, Here's what I was talking about. So I was trying to give y'all some insight into why they are targeting a hunter, or I guess in this case a murderer, why they're targeting the brainstem. Why are they directing a shot directly to the brainstem? And there is a condition, I've only seen it one time in my whole career, although I've learned about it, read a lot about it. There is a condition where the whole left cortex, right cortex, frontal, prefrontal, all of that is destroyed in traumatic brain injury. Okay, there's no anything that would store memory is gone. It's obliterated. There's no kind of functioning that would be associated with language, reading, mathematics, nothing left functioning in the brain that would be associated with emotion. Okay, so it all gets wiped out from the traumatic brain injury. However, by some strange anomaly, the brain stem, the old brain, is left intact. And very often, in order to develop a locked-in syndrome, it also requires the cerebellum to be functioning. And the cerebellum is right at the base of the skull. It kind of wraps around the top of the brainstem, and it's responsible with movement and knowing what position your body is in at any given time. Okay. And if those two parts of the brain are kept intact and they're healthy and they're functioning, then what ends up happening is the person has no memory. They have no language. They have no emotion. There's nothing there. They're a shell of a person, but they're still going through sleep-wake cycles. They can walk. Occasionally they'll look at you, but you're not really sure if they are making contact with you, what are they thinking? Because they don't have that. There's no memory. There's nothing there that would say, oh, that's a human being. What you'll most often see their eyes directed towards high contrast, right? If there's something in the room that's got black against white, then they'll they'll keep their eyes on that, just like a newborn baby does. A newborn baby will do exactly the same thing. So, the person that I saw that I, well, I'm gonna say worked with for about a month, but that, you know, it's very hard to wrap your head around the fact that their brain is really not working. They don't have any ability to make new memory, to form memory. That it's not there. The one person did regain a little bit of what we thought might be some function, but it came in the form of taste. And of course, taste would be old brain, right? But there was a preference that was developed that we noticed. And so you thought, well, there's got to be a little something functioning, or why would he remember, you know? It was absolutely, without a doubt, the most interesting thing that I've ever watched. But he would develop. There would be certain people that he would watch. Other people he would his eyes could just move past them as if they were invisible. But it's a pretty terrifying thought, isn't it? It's a terrifying thought to sort of become like a prisoner. He could still move. He wasn't paralyzed. But he had no volition. So even though he could move, he didn't think about moving. He didn't want to move. He was static, but then he had to go to physical therapy like 4 times in a 24-hour period, and they would direct, you know, without going into a lot of detail, the physical therapist would provide a structure that would have him moving so he would get exercise and, you know, everything. So even though there was really no hope of him developing any memory or preference or anything like that, you know, he was still alive. He didn't require a feeding tube. He would instinctively swallow. He didn't require any extraordinary measures for life, and essentially he could, you know, live for the next 20, 30, 50 years, whatever, you know, depending on whatever his age was. So you know, the brain's very, very interesting, but you can see why, you know, that switch hitting that brainstem is essential, and it's actually a preferred mark for a hunter. They work long and hard to learn how to clip the brainstem of a deer. They know just where to hit it so that the meat stays good, the meat doesn't have any fragments of bullet in it, and then to keep their trophy intact if that's the point of what they're doing. So, all right, I'm going to be quiet now. She's about to give you basically a rundown of how she thinks this all unfolded, and it is very dramatic. And pay attention to Alec, Randy's reaction, and then when we see old Buster.
She sustained. I also want to mention, remember we had this wound to the, so we have 4 we know about, right? We've got right side of the abdomen, left thigh, like left, you know, the left side of the head in the front. We have breast first, and then we have this last wound while she was prone on the ground, okay, to the back of the head. We also have this additional wound to the left wrist that exited a little bit higher. Now, is it possible that her arm was just somewhere
Like Governor
in that
Connolly in
Yes.
the JFK assassination.
But remember, we know that she must have been in a lot of pain in her abdomen from that shot that went through the abdomen. And if she is bent over, where would her hand likely be? You know, it makes sense she might be bent over with her hand right there. And so if her hand,
Hi,
her hand
DB.
is bent, she's got her hand on her belly, The wound entering the left wrist could exit there before actually going out. So if she's got her hand on her belly, I don't know if that's actually happened, but that's why I described 5 individual gunshot wounds, but because the left wrist could have moved, it could have happened before another one of the shots.
And what you just described there with her wrist kind of close to her stomach after suffering that abdominal and thigh wound, that is consistent with the evidence what you just described, is that correct? That having her hand right there like you
Yeah,
just described?
it would be consistent. I can't say 100% that that's what happened, but, that is a gunshot wound to the left wrist, and it may have been sustained while she had her hand on her
It's so sad. So sad.
Give me one sec.
She must have been so frightened. Terrible. People, selfish, greedy people, are at the heart of most of the tragedy in the world. Horrible. Even all this nonsense in the Ukraine, it's so pointless. It's so senseless. It's stupid for Ukraine to go in there. It was stupid for us. It's just terrible. Terrible. The suffering. It's awful. And for what,
All right, Dr. Reamer, I'm going to show you some images, and if you could stand back that way, just so we can again try to protect these as much as we can. These again are very graphic, is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you, if you could, and I'm going to kind of give them to you this way. States 488, 489, 490, 491, 9. And do you generally recognize those images?
Yes.
Autopsy photos you took of Maggie Murdaugh?
Yes, these are photographs that I took of Maggie Murdaugh's wounds.
All right, and would those assist you in explaining these injuries to the jury?
So
Yes.
this is
All right, Your Honor,
Randy,
this time,
the patriarch
I'd move
now,
into
that the
evidence.
dad has died.
States 488, 489, 490, 491, 492, 493, 495, 498.
I will say this. So he was there, every day, sitting in his same place. It's so funny because nobody ever sits with him. He kind of sits there like he's king of the world, right? When on the day that they played the audio that showed that, yeah, Murdaugh was there at the kennels with Maggie and Paul. And was there only minutes before getting in the car and driving, to his mom's house. He left. He got up and left, and it was a couple of days. He stayed gone for quite a while. He's now started coming back, but it did seem like he had he's got a visceral reaction today too. He looks at Alex back a few times, and you think. I think he's thinking about if he had a gun, what he would do to Alex's brainstem. No, I don't think, not for a minute, do I think that they were trying to lock in Maggie and Paul. No, that's exact opposite. If you destroy the brainstem, it's instant death. There's not even like a minute or a 3-minute waiting period for the process to happen. It's instantaneously. It's like, boom, there won't be another heartbeat. There won't be another thought. It's over. Quick, like over. It's a humane, type of shot. So Paul got shot in the chest, and then instantly brainstem is severed. And of course the brain is shotgun point blank, so the brain is, destroyed. But the bulk of it, the point of it was to aim at that brainstem. these are hunters. You got to remember, these are hunters, and that's what they're doing when they're shooting large game. Their target, they're not trying to do a belly shot or anything like that, because they destroy the meat. They can't eat the animal, and they certainly don't want to hit the animal in the brain or the head, because then you don't have your trophy to mount on the wall, right, Barry? So they learn to target that area of the spinal cord for that whatever animal that is they're targeting, because they want to take them out. They want it quick and fast. They don't want to chase. They don't want to chase a injured deer, 10 miles, 15 miles through the woods either. That's not optimal. So if they're a really great shot and they know what they're aiming at, they can make that shot and the deer just is on the ground. It's instant. It's like boom. It's like turning a light switch off. So no, it's the exact opposite. I don't think these shots were done trying to increase suffering. It was the exact opposite. They were shot. They were humane. It was the ending shot to say there's no more fear. There's no more pain. It's done, right? So yeah, just wanted to clarify that. But watch Randy's reaction. Boy, Alex suffering. This thing with Maggie, it was much more difficult than listening to Paul. Is that because he was there and he saw how much she suffered? Is that because he was there and he saw the fear and heard her cries of anguish and fear? Something, because he definitely has a stronger reaction listening to the information about Maggie.
499.
No objection, Your Honor.
You're admitted.
Dr. Reamer, if you could grab the dial stick and come on down here, and I'm going to try to move through these as expeditiously as I can. Starting with 488, tell the jury.
What? Okay, thanks. Okay, so,
Just stand on this side real quick.
yeah,
So that,
okay, that's good. All right, so, this is a photo of, her left thigh. Okay, this is the knee area. And we can see this is kind of on the inside area, of the front
I
of
think
the
he's remembering.
left thigh. And we do
See?
have the stippling around it, which tells us that it was shot within a certain, like, relatively close.
And Randy is disgusted.
and we have the stippling as you've described. Moving on to
Okay.
stage 489. What is
All
this right here?
So you can kind of appreciate this is like the curve of her knees. This is the back of the left thigh where we have an exit wound.
Going on now to stage 490. What is this?
Okay, so this is the entrance wound on the right side of the front of the abdomen below the rib cage, close to the midline. And we do have stippling here. It's a little sparser and a little further spread. So that was also close enough, within 3 or so feet, to deposit the stippling, probably a little further back than the one to the left thigh, because there's more tightness of the stippling on the thigh. So if we think of it as kind of going outward, it covers a wider area and is more sparse on the right side of the abdomen.
Moving on to the next
Isn't
one.
that
What is this
interesting
right here?
that he's
Okay,
not,
so
I mean, you
this is
can
the
clearly
exit
see
wound
Alec is
to the left side
overwhelmed.
of the lower
And
back.
even Randy is really controlled. And Buster just seems kind of like he doesn't know what to do.
Just very quickly, you mentioned that there's stippling on both the abdomen and the thigh, but there's a little bit of difference in distance between the two. Is that correct?
Yes, a small amount. There's stippling on both, but the wound to the thigh is a more tighter, more closely packed bunch of stippling, and doesn't appear as further away from the actual defect. So that was a little bit closer than to the barrel of the gun was a little closer to her body than the one to the right side of the abdomen, but both of them were within 3 feet.
And those were the only two wounds that you observed with stippling of the ones that you've described, is that
Yes.
correct? All right. Going on now to this next 492. Tell us what this is, if you would, please.
Okay, so this is a wound to the left wrist, and we can see this is her left thumb, so it's kind of right over there. And it's going through the left wrist, exiting on the soft side of her left forearm.
And moving on now to 493. What
Okay.
does that look like?
Yes, so there it is, that's the exit wound, so she had the entrance wound to the part of her wrist near her thumb, and it's going through the left forearm area, exiting at an angle, right? You know it's kind of
See,
exiting at
Buster?
an angle, because
Still,
this
no
is this
crying.
defect is oblong, right? If it's going straight across, we would just have a hole, right? But if something's exiting in an angle, we have more of an oblong exit.
All right. Moving on to the next one, and again,
That
this
is
is graphic,
so
but can you
odd to
tell me
me.
what this
Yeah.
is, and I'm going to move the picture down as you describe it, please.
Okay, so here's her belly button, just to give you a reference point. And this was that entrance wound on the right side of the abdomen. This is another injury that kind of grazed, kind of abraded the left side of the abdomen before going through her left breast.
And then
Okay, you saw that weird scratching. Well, maybe you didn't because it was Buster. So watch Buster back here. Okay. He's scratching his eye in a really unusual way, but the takeaway from that is a lot of people will use like rubbing their eyes or kind of pulling on their eyelashes. That is a form of self-stimulation. It can be very relaxing. We see it a lot with people that are on the spectrum. They'll stimulate their eyes like that. So I thought that was interesting because it was really about the only thing that I saw that I felt like he was that maybe there was some evidence of him being overwhelmed. It looks to me, and I could be 100% wrong because I don't know this person. I don't know anything about him other than what the newspapers, have put out. But I get the feeling of Chris Watts, right? Chris Watts, who there wasn't a lot of emotion that was real. He just seemed to always be just a little bit removed from the picture, except for the day of his arraignment, and then he was, or not his arraignment, but when he was sentenced. He was very emotional that day, and it came out, there was some crying, he was moving his leg, that kind of thing. So Buster just seems, you're talking about losing your mom and your brother in this horrific tragedy. You've lost your father, he's in prison. You've lost your identity as a Murdaugh. You've lost your family fortune. You've lost your opportunity for law school. Nothing is turning out as you had planned that it would be since you were a kid. He seems very distant and not emotional. He seems almost relaxed. His I don't know, mate. His mate seemed, and I call her mate because they're not officially married, but they live together, and I think she seems more emotional. And then John Marvin and his wife are really, really upset. They're really grieving. So I'll play this and just watch how the scratching his eye seems to be really extended. It's a kind of a strange movement. That may have been like a soothing behavior that he has developed over his life. And that may be the one little window that we got into, he is really upset because he doesn't look like it.
Injury that kind of grazed, kind of abraded the left side of the abdomen before going through her left breast.
And then moving down,
Yeah.
is that
Okay.
sufficient? I can't really see.
Yeah, so it's fine. Okay, this is a very large destructive hole in the left side of her face, including parts of her left ear. And this makes sense to be a continuation of the one through the left breast.
Okay. Look at that look on Randy Murdaugh's face right there. That tells you everything you need to know. He's looking at that and he's thinking, and remember, he's a hunter. He's been an attorney. He's a world-class attorney. He knows. He knows the truth. I have a question to ask everybody. If you guys believe that Alec Murdaugh is kind of reliving the memory, and that is what has got him so distraught right now, put a 1. If you think that he's just playing the role of a grieving husband and father, put a 2. Just a little curious what everybody's takeaway is. And I agree, Carol. I think Alec's name is mud. With his family members, I think they're all gonna walk away from him. They'll get an indictment on this. I think not an indictment. Blah. He'll be found guilty. And I think they'll be done with him. I think after listening to this evidence, I think they all kind of know. Hey, Cali Connect. You are too mean. Welcome. Hey, Sandy, Colorado. I wish I was in Colorado. Families prepared before trial. No to show emotion if possible, even if they need medication. In other videos, family videos, Buster, in what? In other... No. I don't think Buster's on the spectrum at all. Nope. Not. No, look, the stimming is not a secret thing. Stimming just means you're self-soothing. A lot of people do it. Watch someone under duress and you'll see them do things like wringing their hands, chewing their cuticles of their fingernail, rhythmically rubbing the tops of their thighs. My daughter, she takes a little bit of hair right from the nape of her neck. She's got long hair like I do. And she takes a little bit of hair from the nape of her neck, from the bottom of the hair, and then lightly runs her fingers all the way down the length. And she does that over and over and over. And she'll do it if she's really concentrating, like if she's reading or studying. But she'll also do it if she gets nervous, if she gets uncomfortable. And we call that stimming. Stimming is just self-stimulation. I know it's a term that is most often associated with the spectrum type of literature, but everybody does it. We all have certain things that we can do that give us a sense of relaxation. Let me point this out too. Buster, not only the strange scratching on his eye, but he also chews on his cuticles, on his nails. Did y'all notice that? When the really emotional information begins to emerge, pay attention. You'll see him. He's chewing. He'll look at it and he'll chew, and he'll look and he'll chew. I've seen little kids that are not on the spectrum, and yet they end up in my office because their nails, their fingertips are bleeding because their anxiety is coming out in pulling and chewing at the nail cuticle because it's relaxing to them, right? Okay. Sometimes people pull their hair out, trichotillomania, pulling individual strands of hair. It can come from their head, it can come from their eyebrows. I've seen people pull their eyelashes. There is also skin picking, where they pick at one part of the face or neck or arm, and it'll make a sore. A lot of people that will pick at the skin on their face and their neck also pick their fingertips. And these, look, this isn't minor. These wounds that they create can be open to infection. I've seen some go really deep. I mean, it can be bad. So, as I said, the stimming is a term that you very often hear related to spectrum, but it's really more accurate to look at it as being related to anxiety, obsessive compulsive OCD type situations. So this is they're in an incredibly difficult situation right now. I'm sure the anxiety is overwhelming, right? Yes, Moonlight View, as you finger comb your drying hair, right? And it's very relaxing to run your fingers through that straight, clean hair, right? Feels good and it's calming. So yeah, we are seeing Buster, the strange eye stimulation, chewing on the fingertips. So there's a little bit, and even the candy that Alec Murdaugh is eating, that's stimulating, right? That's calming. I teach a grounding exercise for people that have panic disorder. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And I ask those people to carry with them like a little container of Tic Tacs, so that when they get down to the final step of name 1 thing I can taste, they take that Tic Tac out and put it in their mouth. That forms a learning contingency for the brain, that when that mint comes and the brain perceives the mint, there's this flood of relaxation, and it, so it works. You can train the brain to relax just like a brain is trained to be anxious. All right. Wow, we went way on a tangent, didn't we? But that's okay. It's educational. So, all right. So most people believe that Alec is having this extreme emotional reaction because he's reliving those final moments that he had with Maggie, and Maggie experienced something very frightening and very painful, and he's having to remember, and acknowledge that he caused it.
Confident that this was all the result of a single bullet, fired shot. And what we see over here is basically a bruise from, it didn't actually go into the left shoulder, but as it's coursing upward through the breast before it kind of go, and if she's bent over, then it's going to bruise this clavicle area, right? That's that bone right here, before going into the left side of her lower face. It kind of go, and if she's bent over, it was all the result of a single bullet, fired shot. And what we see over here is basically a bruise from, it didn't actually go into the left shoulder, but as it's coursing upward through the breast before it kind of go, and if she's bent over, then it's going to bruise this clavicle area, right? That's that bone right here, before going into the left side of her lower face.
All right, moving on. Now, and I'm going to go out of order just a bit. I'm at 499.
Did y'all see
And
it?
Can you explain?
What'd y'all think about Randy's reaction? You could see him. I'm talking about Randy, okay? You could see that moment of realization come to him. He's watching, he's listening, and you can just see the tilt of his head and his eyes change, and he's like, that son of a bitch did it. You could just see it. It's crazy. It is terrible. Big Up says he would do, no, who said he would do it again? Yeah, Big Ups. Do you think so? I don't know. I think he is deep in it right now. This whole, I've made a terrible mess of things. How did I let it get this far? What the hell is wrong with me? Right? It's kind of, here, I really believe, I'm telling y'all, I really believe that he blamed Paul, that he had a temper tantrum, that they uncovered him at work and it was all about to come out, and all the partners and the friends, and that it was all coming down generations, things that his father did and his grandfather before him, and it was all going to end with him, right? Stupidity, if you will. But in his crazy, I need power and control kind of brain, while he's still in the fancy offices, he still has his finger right there on that lifestyle, but he sees it going. And when they come in and they confront him about the money, he knows when he leaves that day, he knows it's over. He knows that the house is gone. It's got a couple of mortgages on it that were illegal mortgages. Maggie never signed anything to say that he could get those mortgages. So Palmetto Bank would be another casualty of his stupidity. I mean, the amount of devastation from this one fool is shocking. It's shocking when you look at the ripple effect. But I believe, here's the deal, I believe that their ability to do this, to accomplish what it was that they were doing, I think it's because it had been going on for multiple generations. Just like with the drug trafficking, the moonshine, and the marijuana, his dad and grandpa had been doing it together with the bowlers, right? They had been doing it for generations. The connection to Palmetto State Bank had been going on for at least 1-2 generations. I think this was the good old boy system that's been there since the Civil War. This is just how these guys were doing business. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. That's why Chris was covering these debts and crap, right? He dropped the ball. He screwed up. And I believe that the whole, don't forget it didn't start with Mallory Beach, did it? We still have Satterfield, and the one that I think started it all, Stephen Smith. His death is coming out. There's going to be a trial where that's concerned. And I know a lot of people have, the rumor mill has been, oh, well, Buster's gay, or Paul was gay. He was in a gay relationship with Stephen Smith. I don't think that's it at all. I think Stephen Smith is one of them. I think if they had the ability to get a DNA test, they would find out that Stephen Smith is actually Alec Murdaugh's kid. That's what I think. So I I think that Alec, when he left the office that day, and he knew what was coming, he knew it was over. There was no more robbing Peter to pay Paul. There was nowhere else to go for help. There was no one willing to give him any money. It was out. It was done. His law license was going to be, gone. His friends were going to be ruined. It was all coming down to a head. And rather than him saying, golly, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, I never should have done that, I never should have stolen the settlements, I never should have, moved the money around and played funny business, money laundering games. Instead of that, you know what he was saying? At damn Paul. If Paul hadn't gotten drunk and killed Mallory, then none of this would be happening. If Mallory Beach was still alive, none of this would be happening. Paul screwed me over. That's what I think happened. And I think that was already simmering in the back of his mind. Now, they said that his dad was a mean man. Very mean. You can kind of look at Randy. He's kind of, he's fairly intense, stern guy, right? You maybe see a little bit of that. Now, Alec had developed the aw shucks, good old boy way, putting people at ease, right? Getting people to... Chris, his friend, said that Alec Murdaugh could talk anyone into doing anything. Just calm, jovial, nice guy. So I think that day there was nothing else. His primary coping was not useful. His mask, he was about to be exposed. He has no idea who he is if he's not a Murdaugh with the power and the money to back that up. You can hear that on the phone calls from the prison, from the jail. He's lying to his son about people trying to buy his green tennis shoes. He's got these fluorescent green tennis shoes, and he's joking with Buster about it. Everybody's asking to buy them. Everybody wants them. And they're laughing, and they're having such a great time, And then Buster seems to catch on, and he goes, well, wait a minute, Dad. If you're in lockdown all day, how were people trying to buy your shoes? And he asked them. And then he tries to make something up, but it falls short, He realizes that his son is on to him. So, and you hear him talking big about Buster getting back into college, right? He paid $65,000. The guy says, okay, we'll get you back in, but here are the steps. Here's the things, the rules you need to abide by. And they're going back to the college now, and they're trying to say, no, we don't like your deal. We want you to let him back in and let him start over with a clean slate. We want him to get a complete do-over, wipe out his bad GPA, and start with a 0 or a 4.0 GPA. Like every college freshman that enters starts with a 4.0, right? And I think that's why the college pulled back and said, no, never mind, we're not going to let him in, is because I think they were aghast that they were bending the rules in such a large way to allow this cheating scandal guy back into the college, and they weren't happy enough with that. They wanted to try to tell the college what to do. And I think the college said, this is ridiculous. We never should have let him in anyway, right? Much less this whole give me everything I want. But I don't think Alec Murdaugh has the ability to see that. I think he is so accustomed to being king of the world that he thinks that people are just supposed to, bow down as he walks by, that he gets to name his tune. Remember, he's the only one at the jail that gets to have 2 commissary accounts. He's paying some guy to let him use his commissary. So he gets double money, whereas everybody else only gets a single money. Because he's special, don't you know? Read the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. So his mask is about to be it's going to be ripped off, and the real Alec, that flawed, scared little boy, is about to be revealed to the whole entire state of South Carolina, and he knows that. And what have we said time and time again? You take the mask off a narcissist, you are in a dangerous situation. They will fight, and they will kill, they will lie, and they will steal to protect their mask. And I think he got there, and that had been rumbling around in his head. If you know, my idiot son hadn't killed Mallory, we'd still be in business. None of these problems would be happening. It's all Paul's fault because he got drunk and he killed Mallory, yada, yada, yada. And when the dog came up with the chicken, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think they'd had run-ins before with the owner of the chickens, and that was just one more. And it was bam. It just broke. The dam broke. So he acted out. He had a temper tantrum against Paul, right? And remember, we've got Maggie pacing along the length of the shed. Is that after Paul was shot? Is that her being frightened, hiding, trying to figure out maybe she was trying to get a phone signal, make a phone call? And then when he finally saw her, her body was in front of the four-wheeler. Was she running? Was she trying to get to the four-wheeler? And that's why he shot her in the leg, was to stop her from running away. And then he has this realization, oh shit, I'm going to have to kill her too. And maybe that was the conflict. That's why he's circling around her as she's, you know, overwhelmed and, you know, trying to manage what was happening, dealing with the pain and whatnot. It's terrible set of circumstances. And I think when I watch him, like I said, he's far more distraught listening to the information about Maggie than about his son. And for all intent and purposes, the report around town was Paul was his favorite. So why isn't he all freaked out about Paul, right? It's really Maggie that's really getting him. And I think he's reliving it. I think he remembers. He's recalling what she said, what he said, what that moment was, you know. And I think that's what we're seeing. So it's terrible. It's really sad.
All right, I'm having trouble seeing what this, oh yeah, okay, yes. So at the time I did the autopsy, and I have a wound to the left
I agree,
wrist
Sissel.
and through the forearm, and a wound that's going along the left side of the abdomen. I can't be certain, I can't say with an absolute certainty that her hand was up against her abdomen at the time that the gunshot wound to her torso was going upward. But if her hand was on her abdomen, which she may have had there after getting shot through the abdomen and bending over, this would be a perfect line through the through the wrist, out the left forearm, and like continuing in an upward direction before fatally entering the left side of her head.
Is that an explanation for how the wrist and that gunshot could be related?
So I took a photo of the wrist and the scrape along the left side of her abdomen together because it occurred to me, based on my experience over decades, that this may have represented a single inflicted shot. Maybe the one to the wrist was a separate shot. And in my autopsy report, I described it as separate because unless I'm absolutely certain that it's from the same shot, I'm going to describe them separate. But I'm able to tell you, so we have 4 wounds to the body, and it may, 5 wounds, but if we count the left wrist as separate, but if the left wrist was connected to the other one, to one of the others, then it's there's only 4 shots to the body.
And then finally, states 498.
Okay, so this is also a very ugly shot. And this is the back of her head. And is a routine matter. She had hair there, but it wasn't apparent what kind of a wound she had back there. There was blood, but I'll cut away the hair and to display the entrance wound. And you can see how long it is. It's long. It's not just a hole going from back to front. It's going in a downward direction like that. And this ammunition breaks up into fragments, and we have like these fragments basically coursing along the top of her back, going through the skin and the fatty tissue beneath in her upper back. So, and this one, before it actually hit the back, it went through the skull at the back right side of the back of her head, as well as the brain stem and cerebellum.
Thank you, Dr. Reamer. We're almost done. If you could have a seat real quick, and we will conclude the examination.
I noticed, I believe Jeanette.
Your Honor, also at this time, I would move in to
Okay, sorry. I think it was Jeanette I saw a few minutes ago say, "Are you sure that's Randy?" I've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and if you look up pictures of well, we're about finished with this. Let me share. Okay, so I'm gonna so let's see. Hold on, we'll get to Randy's pictures. Okay. So, you know, I don't guess it is Randy, because they're showing this guy as being Randy Murdaugh. And if you go down over here, see, this is Buster's girlfriend, right? Or wife or whatever. So he's clean shaven. So I don't really know who that man is. Do y'all know who he is? This is John Marvin. This is the other brother. But the guy looks just like them. What do y'all think? He has really been at every let's see if that tells us. Alec Murdaugh's surviving son, Richard, known as Buster, is sitting behind his father in the courtroom. Somebody else is too. See, there he is, right there. Maybe he's the Parker guy. Um, Murdaugh Law Firm. Parker. Peters, Murdoch, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich. See if we get some photos here. Okay, so there's Randy Murdoch. I was wrong. This is the patriarch. Okay, do we have anybody else? Here's some more attorneys here. Could this be him right here? He looks like Santa Claus. Danny Henderson looks like Santa Claus. Gray Holmes. No, it's not him, is it? I don't know who he is. Somebody find out. That is very strange, isn't it? Jeanette, whoever he is, he looks really mad. Yeah, he does. Give me some more ideas, y'all. Who could he be? Maybe he's the replacement for the Marshall older guy. He looks just like the Murdochs. Is that a Bulwer? Well, Barrett Bulwer's dead. So is the dad, Barrett. No, I don't think it's a Bulwer. I don't know who that would be. Both of the Barrett Bulwers are dead. I'm searching. I'm not ignoring. Yeah, it's not. No, the two Bulwer guys are dead. And that's Chris. I will, no, it's not the Lafitte guy. I thought for a minute maybe it could be the dad of Russell Lafitte, but that's not him. Maybe the guy is related to Maggie. Is that possible? Could that be maybe Maggie's brother? Maggie Murdaugh brother. No, not even close. The guy is a Murdaugh. Like when I'm looking at old photos of the older Murdaugh men, that it looks just like him. Somehow he's a Murdaugh. I'll have to look. I'll look through family photos again. I tried. It's creepy. That didn't work. It's creepy how much Alec Murdaugh looked like, or Buster Murdaugh looks like Alec Murdaugh when he was young. When he was young, he looked a lot like him. I'm looking through like party pictures and stuff that they list people's names, and I don't see the guy. He's in a lot of pictures, a lot of family pictures, but nothing yet that has a name attached to it. Huh. I may not be able to sleep tonight. I've been convinced that that guy was Randy Murdaugh. The other possibility is maybe that is their private investigator. But if that is their private investigator, then why is he so angry about a Maggie? Right? All right, I'll be quiet now. Oh, wait. I have to reshare. Share screen. Audio. Alright. I think it is Alex's sister, Lynn's husband. Okay, can you pick up again, please? Did Chris Wilson get disbarred? I think he's still facing charges.
501, which is the diagram that Dr. Reamer did of the injuries to Maggie.
Defense.
No objection.
They are admitted.
Dr. Reamer, you mentioned
Yes,
that there was
disbarred,
a slight difference or a difference in the
February
stippling
3rd
between the
this year.
abdominal and the thigh wound. And which
Wrongful
one
death.
seemed to be a little bit farther away according to your review of the evidence?
Yes, the gunshot wound to the abdomen was slightly further away than the gunshot wound to the left thigh.
And that could be consistent with Maggie
No,
and
he's
the
not.
shooter changing their positions in relationship to one another.
Yeah, people aren't completely just standing still. It could be that the shooter was moving closer toward her or moving a little bit back or she could have been moving, or a combination of the two. So I don't know what happened there, but I do know that the barrel of the gun was closer at the time it struck her left thigh, because the stippling is more tight concentrically and doesn't cover as wide an area as the one to the right side of the abdomen.
You've described the injuries to the front, and then the injury to the breast and to the head, and then this final injury to the back of the head. Could that be consistent with the shooter circling his victim?
Yeah, I think that only makes sense if there's some movement on the part of the shooter. We know the gunshot wound to the front of the body that's going up. If Maggie was bent over, either in air or on the ground, the shot would have been fired from behind her, right? From behind her, that's the only way it's going to go up and through the base of the, like the chin area into her head, right? She's bent over. That's the way that it logically makes sense. Nobody's sitting on the floor, and you couldn't do that. And after that shot was sustained, the one that went through the front side, the vertical one, okay, it's vertical through her body, but most likely occurred while she was bent over, or then that's going to be an incapacitating shot because it went through her brain and caused her to fall to the ground. She's bent over, she gets that shot, she's going to fall face down, and then the last shot to the back of her head is going in the other direction. So that's going downward. So we have one going, so that only can occur if the wound to the left side of the front is somebody shooting from behind her, and then the gunshot wound to the back of the head is going downward while she's on the ground, indicating somebody's standing at, like, you know, at the top of her.
Was there a lot of blood accumulated in Maggie's abdomen?
Not that much. The thing about these wounds is there's so much tissue destruction that blood is just basically in all the tissues. So it's not like sometimes with like even like a small caliber bullet, you know, there's a single clearly defined wound path, and I can take out blood from the abdomen. But in this case, there was so much tissue destruction. There was a lot of blood in the soft tissues, but not necessarily something I can scoop out and measure.
Did the lack of a lot of blood in the abdomen tell you anything about how rapidly these all occurred together?
Yes, if the wound stopped there to the abdomen and somebody walked away, you know, she would have had more bleeding out of those tissues into the abdominal cavity.
In both Maggie and Paul, did you make any observations about their stomach contents?
Yes, so part of the autopsy, I'm not just looking at the wounds, I'm examining all of the internal organs, and this is how I knew it went through the pancreas and the kidney, because remember, I'm not just looking outside of the body. I do everything, look at all of the internal organs and dissect each one. And when examining the stomach, I will document the contents of the stomach, and they each had a lot of recently digested food fragments. So, you know, they had a full stomach of food.
Were those stomach contents consistent with one another?
Yeah, they looked identical to each other. They were kind of gray tan, you know, couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it may have included meat. I didn't see any corn or, you know, green beans or anything like that. But whatever it was, they were identical to each other. And I believe she had 600 mLs, which is like it's 450 mLs is a pound, so it's like almost 1.5 pounds of food, and he had 500 mLs, which is a little bit more than a pound. But they looked similar, like they may have shared a meal together.
Okay, and so we know that the housekeeper, that she had made them dinner. So now we know they did, in fact, eat dinner. Alec's story is not measuring up. What the things that he has said, it not aligning with anyone else's stories, not aligning with the telematics on the car, not aligning with the recordings from Snapchat from Will. So it's hard to envision a situation where he didn't do it. For me it is. I don't know. What do you guys think? So we have about 100 people here. If you believe that Alec is guilty, that he did this, put a 1. If you believe someone else did it, even if he's the one that hired the other person, but just someone else that actually pulled the trigger, put a 2. Either he pulled the trigger, he did it, number 1, or somebody else did it. Whether he asked him to do it or not doesn't matter. Just talking about just the trigger man, right? He was the only one there. Well, we don't know. I'm not sure that's true, Big Ups. Okay, so Robert Hopkins thinks there was someone else that may have done the actual dirty deed. Okay. Most everybody thinks he actually pulled the trigger. My husband says 2, but he's wrong. That's so funny. How about 2 shooters? Yeah, of course, Tonda. I would say that would be an answer for number 2, because maybe Alex shot and then the other person shot, right? 1,700 acres is a desolate area. It's a really big area to hide a gun and some bloody clothes, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So I will say this: he lies constantly. That's proof enough. Yeah. That was a devastating video of Paul with the dog, and you can hear Maggie. She and Paul sound happy and normal. It was devastating. And then you add in the telematics of the car. He was there. Whether he was there by himself or he had somebody with him that helped, you don't know. But he was there, no doubt, and he lied about being there. He bald-faced lied about it. One thing that I think is notable is this. Paul's truck was found on the side of the road, correct? Hoping the hogs would eat the bodies by the time he got back. Possibly, maybe. So Paul's truck was found on the side of the road, right? One thing that I thought about, let's say there was somebody else there, someone that would have been with the family and comfortable with the family, but then this terrible event happens, right? And maybe the instruction is, here, take this, take the guns, take the dirty clothes, whatnot, and get out of here. Go, get rid of the guns or clothes or whatever, and go, leave the car out in the woods somewhere, leave the car on the side of the road, walk into the woods and then over to the next road over and flag somebody down. I mean, there's a lot of, it could have been a lot of instruction. It is hard to understand the car being left on the side of the road and Alec and Paul riding around in the car, in the truck, looking at trees. Well, yeah, maybe. Big ups. Maybe. So, it's not just their 1,700 acres either. Their land butts up to the brothers' land. This is a family that's got a lot of land. They own islands. Wilson's Islands or Wilson's Islands. There were a lot of choices for someone to hide the guns and bloody clothes. And I firmly believe that if he's the one that did it, he was wearing the blue raincoat when he shot. All right. Paul's truck was found a half a mile from home by the side of the road. Right, DB? So I don't believe in coincidences in these type of situations. I think it was take this and get the hell out of here right now. Good deal, Charnel. Welcome. Glad to see you. Yeah, I've got to go to bed. But he was in Charleston, confirmed and seen on camera. I haven't really looked into him. Like, I know he has a couple of alibis. I thought there were like two different stippling on the inside of the written quote. Yeah, somebody drove his truck off that property. Yeah. All right, peeps. I gotta go. I gotta go to sleep. I will spend some time between now and Wednesday, trying to figure out, who we're actually talking about that is so angry, sitting front and center right there with Alec Murdaugh. He definitely looks like the Murdaugh men, his face. So, it is not Cousin Eddie. I know what Cousin Eddie looks like. I'm 100% sure of what Cousin Eddie looks like. That is not him. That's right, Robert. Yeah, it's the fact that the truck is not on the property. That's a pretty big suggestion that someone drove off in that truck with the weapons, is what I think, and the bloody clothes, and they disposed of them somewhere in all that Murdaugh land. All right, y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for staying up late with me. This doesn't happen very often, and so I really appreciate it. It's fun. Had a good time talking with y'all. He was really hesitant to claim who was threatening them. Yes, he was, Carol. Yeah, that's true. And in the end, he just sort of put it off to, people online, right? He just kind of made it real vague. But in the beginning, it sounded like he was really thinking about someone specific. So I know that Mallory Beach's boyfriend, he was furious. He was furious about everything, the way it all played out, and the arrogance of the Murdaughs, and the way that they behaved at the hospital, and so he's one that you could put on that list. So, all right, thank y'all so much for being here. Like I said, it's not very often that I get to do this late into the night, so I appreciate all your help. Please hit the thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Y'all know the deal. If you haven't subscribed, I invite you to subscribe. It would help me out if you would. Even if you never come back, I hope you will, though. All right. Y'all sleep well, and I'll see you Wednesday. Okay? Thanks for being here.